This week's episode is brought to you by P Life Nutrition, helping you optimize your health and performance.
Welcome.
To the age of awakening.
Please identify yourself. Enter.
Hey, Triple P Nation, welcome back to the podcast where this week, like every week, we're going to explore the tools, tactics, and strategies to help you achieve personal and business mastery, growth conscious individuals just like yourself. I'm your host, Dr. J. I want to welcome you to the show, all our regular listeners, to our new listeners. So excited and that you're here to join us, taking some time out of the week to up-level your mindset, your business mindset, whatever it is that you're into. And this week, we got a really big guest for you. I'm excited to have him on. His name is Ed Watal. We're going to talk about AI and technology and leadership. Yeah, kind of an interesting topic. So looking forward to speaking with Ed here in just a minute. But before we do, of course, we want to get into our regular weekly six stack episode. And this week, it's about go deep, not wide. What do you mean by that, Jay? Well, it's pretty simple. Let's say your goal is to scale and grow your business in 2024, right? That's awesome. It's a great goal. Now, here's what most people would do. They would come up with some sort of 32-point plan to scale their business, including several different marketing strategies, new systems for fulfillment, maybe software, hiring more staff, anything that they believe that can get them up to a scale position. Then there is what's called going wide. Now, instead, what if you were focused on the one or two main things that would help you scale your business? Maybe that's dialing your Facebook ads or hiring an extra employee to help with fulfillment. Then you focus on mastering your Facebook ads and bringing on and attracting that right person, training them up, and making sure that they're empowered to succeed within your business. You see, then you can move on to the next one or two things that are on your list that is going to help you scale. You see, this is going deep. And going deep simply means you're focusing and mastering on a couple things instead of thing at once. You see, the mind is target oriented. And if you've got too much happening at once, we get this analysis paralysis, mind gets the shutdown, get overwhelmed. So we want to prevent overwhelm and burnout. And quite frankly, going deep is much more effective because it's sustainable as far as your growth into the future. So when you're setting your goals, or if you have your goals already in place for 2024, make sure you go deep and not wide. Hope that helps you succeed and crush all your goals this coming year. This episode, as I mentioned to you, is brought to you by Triple P Life Nutrition. And our product of the month is our fruits and greens, our powdered greens product. It's the new year. Everybody wants to get healthier. Everyone is looking at making better choices and better habits and so on and so forth. You know, one of the things we know is that we need to eat more fruits and vegetables. In fact, the recommendation is between 9 and 12 servings a day. How many of you, raise your hand, get 9 to 12 servings a day? Not many. It's a really tough chore to do. The beautiful thing about the Power Greens is it helps you to get the sufficient and appropriate amount into your diet in one simple serving. I take my fruits and greens each and every day with my protein shake after my workout. The protein greens, it has a pre and probiotic that helps you improve your gut health, your digestion, helps you control appetite, and contain the powerful probiotics that can help symptoms such as IBS, gas and bloating, constipation, all that stuff that makes us feel really unhappy. See, the reality is very few of us ever are going to get the essential amount into our diet. So the fruits and greens products is going to help you achieve that goal. Now, the green formula are notorious for their earthy, dirt-like taste. I've tried many of them, and they frankly suck. And that's where this greens is different, because not only does it contain ultra premium ingredients, but it's really delicious and it's easy to mix. It's free of artificial colors and flavors and preservatives. So Power Greens is also stimulant free and contains no banned substances. Just threw that in there. So go to triplplifenutrition.com, enter save 20 for first order for Power Greens, and up level your health this year. Hey, Triple P Nation, welcome back. As I mentioned, my guest this week is Ed Watal, who is the founder and principal of Intellibus. And he served as a board advisor to the world's largest financial institutions. C-level executives rely on him for IT strategies, architecture, due to his business acumen and deep IT knowledge. Ed, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jay. Thank you for having me.
In our pre-conversation before we went live here, I had mentioned that I was fascinated by the topic of AI and leadership and how they're interrelated. And the topic of AI in of itself has become a hot topic, particularly this year, as it's becoming, as policies are being drafted and concerned about what AI can and cannot do. And maybe I speak for a lot of my listeners. Maybe they're way smarter than me. I'm not really sure, but help us understand better what is AI and how AI particularly is going to impact our lives moving forward.
So I think the simplest way to think about is AI is yet another piece of technology, much like software. And, it's just really incredibly good software that can do more than what any other software has done for us. Apps were a thing that were invented a few decades ago, and apps were not on phones. We have smartphones and apps on the smartphones. So they kind of give us incredible power. And technology is always so really transformed, right from the printing press to the search engines and the internet, right? A lot of it has really been about access to information. And so fundamentally, if you think of the human ability to document and write stuff down, and when you wrote stuff down, you created a document, whether it was a book or a documentary. It's memory, it's history, it's something that you've kind of cast in the sands of time. And AI is now giving you the power to look into the past, into these sands of time, and pull out from it exactly what you need instantly. So you could think of AI as the ultimate search engine. Maybe that's one way to look at it. And again, the tricky part, which a lot of people talk about, is, oh, then that's so powerful. It is just like a human. And so as it becomes more and more human-like, there's a lot of questions around it and concerns. But of course, there's power and benefit to that.
And everything I read is that it's going to impact every aspect of our lives. Ways perhaps maybe, obviously the people on the forefront who understand this technology see where it's going, but again, the average person maybe doesn't quite see how it's going to impact in a variety of different ways. I know a lot of concerns are that people are having. The future economy is going to be, driven by AI technology and robots, and people are going to be out of work, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that's true or not. Maybe you could answer that. However, through history of time, as technologies develop, just the economy shifts and changes, and the jobs shift and change. So, is that more accurate of where you see things go as it relates to AI in employment? And the obviously we can learn from the past how technology has changed.
I think that's an excellent question, especially given the economic times we're in. Inflation is at an all-time high. And if you were to ask an economist, they would say, oh, you want to reduce inflation, just increase unemployment. And while that's just it's just a mathematical thing, but what you're saying is, oh, put people out of work or out of jobs. Now that may not entirely be true. Why? Because there is a concept in employment called structural versus unstructural, and employment or unemployment, if you will. So there's a structural issue in employment, which is someone is looking for a job, they have the right skills, but the job's in a different city or a different country. So there's that structural imbalance. And so AI really first has the power to solve that structural imbalance within employment and unemployment. And then comes the question of, okay, what's beyond that? Will it then also take away the jobs that are not structurally imbalanced, potentially? And again, if you look at, for example, something as simple as manufacturing, I shouldn't say as simple as, it's probably very complicated for the people who work in that industry, but maybe I'm trying to make a distinction between that and knowledge workers, which would assume require a higher order and faculty of analytics and thinking, something where it's more sort of mechanical in nature. It's more mundane in nature, as in a series of steps to be executed by a human. So obviously, humans don't like to do mundane jobs. It's not something very fulfilling. It doesn't make you feel good about it. Oh, I cog in the wheel. That's what people say. So I think a lot of the cog in the wheel jobs will sort of go away in the process, and it shouldn't hurt anyone in the sense that those jobs shouldn't have existed in the first place, just that humans hadn't built the right tools to automate that. And then higher and higher order faculty jobs will be created because, as long as humans are there, they'll be hungry. If they're hungry, they will fulfill their purpose and make money. And if they'll have money and disposable income to spend, and it goes back a little bit to what some people talk about, oh, universal basic income, AI will do everything. I think we are very far away from that. Something like that I don't see as a distinct possibility in the near future.
The other concern I've heard is the AI technology, robots and so much, can they become sentient and literally eliminate the need for humans? I don't know if that's for science fiction or if there's any truth to that, but maybe you can respond to that question.
So it's a fun and interesting topic always to talk about. As much as I don't call myself the AI boomer or the doomer, I kind of think myself more as the mean free path, the AI Buddhist in the middle. So I'll kind of try to take a balanced view of this. So if you think of what can AI do? Can AI become sentient, right? And I think even before that, can AI become human-like? Sentient is maybe even beyond human-like, something more powerful than a human. But let's just say AI can become human-like, and how far are we from that? Now, if you talk to ChatGPT like tools, you'd be like, oh, it sounds like a human. And if you heard of the early stories when the New York Times editor or whoever that was from New York Times went and had a conversation with GPT, the so-called Sydney affair, right? And we saw what happened there. So we've seen that the AI can sound human-like. Now, that's very different from can AI feel human-like. So for someone to feel something, you got to be in a physical body, right? You need a body embodiment for that. So if for AI to really become human-like, you would first need to put AI inside a human-like body. Now, whether it's a cyborg body, and we've seen all the movies there, or it's the avatar, whatever we create, right? And so that's one distinct. And it's funny that if you look at James Cameron, like one of the greatest producers of our time, he's created both of these movies. He created The Terminator, which talks about the doomsday scenario of AI, which is the end of the world scenario, and he's also created Avatar, which sort of shows the biologically advanced future, which is essentially where I see the real promise of AI. I feel the real promise of AI is AI will be able to make human biology better. So imagine a future world where you've cured all diseases, or any new disease that pops up can be solved for in a snap, or you can even predict them even before they happen, and have a lot of preventative health. I talk with several friends of mine who are believers in this idea, and they say, oh, there's no reason a human shouldn't be able to live to 200 years or more. Or death eventually becomes something that you only opt into at some point, biologically, or of course natural causes can cause death, accident or whatever. So that's the real power of AI. The real power of AI is to advance our biology. And I'm a Marvel movie fan, so pushing the envelope further, anyone can be a superhero. So that's the real power of AI. The real power of AI is to turn you into a superhero, not just mathematically and using tools, but biologically.
Fascinating. So is this always in your passion, this kind of work, or did you start something else? And then as kind of the AI technology started to, be brought to the forefront, is that something that, you worked into? Like, give us a little history to your background and how you got to the point that you're at right now.
So yeah, thanks for asking. It's kind of I would say again, I'm not a big believer in determinism. I do believe there's free will. So I'll say it was a series of accidents, if you will, for the lack of a better term. So we'll have middle ground between determinists and free will thinkers. So it was a series of accidents and how we got here, and they were interesting accidents. I was a mechanical engineer, but I always loved to sit in an air conditioned environment and away from the heat. In the hot summer in India, so I would look for the computer lab. And so I got into computers, just trying to avoid. Funny enough, my first job was in mechanical engineering, but again, you had to sit under a gear, under a truck engine with gearboxes and fix that. And I didn't enjoy the heat again one more time, so I went back to a white collar banking job. And banking jobs weren't very fulfilling, even though I worked on Wall Street for a while. I always had that bug for technology. So I could just say, I've always had that engineer itch, bug for technology that's always veered me closer and closer. And over the last decade, I've always had the good fortune to be associated to the forefront of a lot of advancements and developments. Like when Alexa first came out, I was working with the chief evangelist for Alexa, David Spitsky, and helping drive a community of 100 plus to 200 plus developers trying to build Alexa skills. and so forth. So I've been at the forefront of a lot of the adoption of technology, if you will, for lack of a better term. And of course, I've been an engineer myself. So that's where my love for for AI and technology comes from.
It's fascinating. You also have, it seems like a real interest in maybe a passion for leadership as well too. And again, when your publicist sent out an introduction, and I was looking at things that you were enjoy talking about, was the connection of AI and leadership. So how does leadership play into, and then let's get into the melding of AI and leadership, and the definition of what it means as far as those two together.
Yeah, so I think I've always been interested in the idea of I've been very fortunate, I should say, of having some really good coaches and mentors in my life.
Mm.
And so to
Hmm.
me, leadership has been a lot about coaching and mentoring, less about telling someone, oh, you should do this or you need to do this. It's really about sort of letting them be the best version of themselves, and of course a little nudge, right? And it's really I was talking to one of the great the soccer coaches in the world, and I asked them, what distinguishes the greatest soccer player in the world from the not so greatest, because there's always that 1%, and what's that distinguishing factor? And his answer to me was, it's really those who are the greatest act on the nudge. And
Hmm.
that's what coaching and mentoring is all about. It's about giving that, not even giving them the nudge, because there's books and theories on giving the nudge, pushing the person. But I believe it's really about allowing. And so one of the great statements I've heard on leadership is the value of the leader really is to allow things to happen. It's
Hmm.
really enabling the other to follow their nudge and helping them discover it in that sense, right? It's not really telling them, because mostly people have the answers within them. They're just looking for someone to hold space for them. So that's what leadership is to me, right? Being able to hold space for others.
I love that. I love that. I've been someone who studied leadership for a long time, because leadership is what helped transform my life, my personal life, my business life. My listeners know the story. I'll just give you a little insight. Struggled in business when I first started. I mean, mightily. My wife was my business partner, so it was cost the marriage, the business, everything. And reluctantly, she said, "No, we need some help." So I reached out to a mentor who wound up being my coach, and told him everything that was going on. As he says to me, it was about 5 minutes. I just dumped on him, and it was everything outside myself. It was everything else that was wrong. Never looked once in the mirror and took responsibility that I was the cause of what was happening. And after that dump, there was a dead silence on the phone. I thought he hung up, and I said to him, "You still there?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "I know exactly what your problem is." And I was like, "Okay, here's the nugget. Here's what I need to quote unquote do." Right. And he says to me, "Jay," he goes, "Your life and your business is waiting for a leader to show up, and it's not you." And it was the first time someone ever held me accountable for my own choices and my behavior and my mindset. And then I really began to dig in and study this thing, leadership. In my opinion, it's been at the foundation of all the success that I've experienced. And it's why I'm so passionate about teaching it. And I was excited to have you on as well, too. And I love that concept of the nudge, because I do coach entrepreneurs and stuff. It really, you're right. Most people know what they need to do, just need to be nudged in the right direction. And so let me ask you this one question as it relates to the nudge. So do you believe the nudge exists within us? It's just someone that inspires the nudge to come to the forefront and to act upon it? Or do you also feel that there are times when the coach or the leader helps someone identify the nudge? In other words, they can't see it themselves, and then they take action on it. Or is it a combination of both?
I think you're right about that. It is a combination of both, because one of the things that I talk about, there's probably a video of this on our website. I call it the RPG IQ theory of intelligence, which is essentially reactive, predictive, generative, which we are now all familiar with, intuitive, and quantum. So
Hmm.
active predictive are pretty straightforward, the baby kicking in the womb, and baby learning from their hand burning, and generative is just being able to apply it to more things, unknown things, being able to be more imaginative, if you will. But intuitive is really that nudge within you. It's the kind of listening to your inner voice. Some people say that, not to get all philosophical about it, but even practically and biologically, it's sort of quietening the chatter and the chaos in your mind to
Yep.
let things settle down, right? So be in that Zen moment, and then you sort of feel the answer. You intuit the answer from within. No one's telling you that. And then the quantum, which is, I believe, the higher order of that, is what we call the theory of mind or the subjective experience. It's our ability to seek the other's intuition. It's our ability to sort of be able to feel what the other might be feeling. Some call it sympathy, empathy. But if you really think about the theory of mind, or think about the conundrum of the mind-body experience. So our own mind-body experience, we know because we have our mind and our body, and therefore it gives us the faculty and the ability to create subjective experience, as in the ability to have that empathy, to know what the other is feeling. And I think that's at the very root. So it's a combination.
That was really eloquently said. I've talked a lot about here about quantum physics, and I talk about, it's so much how we feel, that puts an energy and vibration out, as essentially, whether you want to call it the law of attraction or just basic quantum physics, is that, you know, um, it's just a particle and it reacts to the observer. And therefore, then if our emotion or energies are high emotion energies, it's going to react in kind, and therefore that's what we begin to experience and how it can influence those around you. But you just explained that so eloquently. I want to thank you for that. But the intuitive part, let me ask you this question. Are some people just generally more intuitive because they're able to quiet their mind? In other words, how do people develop the skill of becoming more intuitive, in your opinion?
I think if you were to think of, again, I'll try to use my RPG IQ analogy one more time, if you'll allow me.
Sure.
So I think at the very root of it, if you think of reactive intelligence, reactions come from something wired into our DNA. And what gets wired into our DNA is our survival, right? Essentially, it's our ability to make better choices, better decisions. They say that's how the DNA improves over time. That's the evolutionary process. So if you think about what's really getting baked into your DNA is those survival scenarios, what you should avoid. That's what is baked into your DNA by and large. And of course, more than that, but that's one of the factors that's baked into your DNA, what you should avoid. And therefore, what you should avoid generally will evoke fear. And so at the very root, a lot of what your DNA is carrying is fear.
Hmm.
Now, mathematically and chemically and biologically, there may be a way to explain this, but at the very foundation, and therefore a lot of the meditation and things that people do is to sort of unravel and overcome and face those fears, if you will. Some of those are conscious, some of those are subconscious, and again, they could be generational in nature. So at the very root of it is our ability to sort of transcend from that reactive state to the predictive state, the generative state, and all the way up to the intuitive state. So the more we learn how to cope our fears, not just the conscious, but the subconscious fears, and sort of overcome that. And it can be done in the moment, or it can be done so that that becomes a habit. There are people who are able to be in meditative states with their eyes open. So it's really when you reach that state, you are able to intuit in real time, or you have to go into a state where you can intuit.
Sure. And one of the things I teach often is about, preparing your mind for success each day. Taking time each morning to clear your mind, to meditate, whatever it might be that helps people to slow their brain waves, to clear their mind. And the morning's best is because we don't have the accumulation of the day's events that are running through our head. And so it gives us the best opportunity to be intentional based on how we want to show up in a day, the energy that we want to bring, the business meeting, how we want to show up in that meeting, what outcomes do we want to achieve. So literally create in our mind, visualizing, sensing it, and feeling in every way, shape, or form that we've already experienced, that we know what success looks like, is, I would believe, is far more predictive of those results occurring. So taking time each day, like I said, I teach all my listeners this, is that the more that you can, be intentional in your morning routine and prepare for your day to be successful. I believe that also helps nurture the intuitiveness to get that sense of feel of what's the right direction, and then to calm that voice, that fight or flight that wants keep us running away from challenging or uncomfortable situations.
Indeed, you kind of said it very, very, very eloquently there. Clearly, it's really your ability to quieten your mind at the very root of it. And often they say that speech is silver, silence is golden for that reason.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. How is AI going to change what it means to be a leader? How do you feel that that's going to happen?
I think one of the things that I think about is what's the role of AI in the short term until such time as we talk about, a human-like AI, AGI, or a sentient AI. But in the short term, while we have not reached that state, what does that mean? Yeah, so I think the real question is in the short term, while AI is maturing to become more human-like. We've seen the movie Her and Transcendence and all these other movies. So there's a far future where AI is indistinguishable from a human, and if it's biologically advanced like transcendence, it's just another cloned human. And there's no difference really, except that that cloned human is kind of hardwired like the movie Avatar to the Tree of Souls or to the internet, for the lack of a better term. So that's the far future. Far future is a biological human connected wirelessly or in some way to the internet. And we all communicate in real time. And until such a future happens, what may happen in the near future is a more advanced GPT-like tool, a very fancy chatbot, something that can pretty much do everything you want. The question is, how would we use it to become better people, better leaders, if you will? And what would it do for you? I think the one thing that it would do for us is hold space for the AI itself to be a true leader. As in, if you think of an AI, a really good AI would not be the one that would be a persona or a character-based AI. So, for example, if you've tried these tools that are out there, there are plenty of them: Chirper, Chorus, Character AI, and so forth, where they create character AIs of specific individuals. And you talk to them, you kind of feel it can be very annoying at times. When you talk to them, they will talk like that person.
Yeah.
If it's and don't want to name people, but you can think of some of the popular leaders who are out there, and the AI would say, "Oh, you must be stupid then." It'll say that back to you. Now, that may not be very nice as a leader. But these people are leaders. They are billionaires, multi-billionaires. They are famous leaders in our society today. So AI will really bring in what I call this the screen hypothesis. So my belief is that there would be a screen that would emanate, which would sort of be the filter between all humans. So if I'm talking to you and if I use an expletive or a word that you don't necessarily would like, or it could be damaging to the relationship, the AI would screen and firewall that and transform, and you will see what was probably a more filtered version of that message. So, person here could, so it sort of gives you the biological release. So you can scream and yell and fret and fume, but the other person's not seeing all that. They're just seeing, oh, this person's still smiling, and you're fine. So your relationship's fine. You still did all that yelling that you had to, got it out of your biological system until such time as biology can be improved, so you don't have to go through that process.
Sure. Man, I'm just thinking about that, coming from a strong Italian family. That's why we communicate. We yell and scream at each other in a loving way.
And that's fine. You can say, hey, no screen, and you lift the screen,
Right.
and that's okay. You can see the real person in their element.
Yeah. You said something as you started that answer. I want to go back to you. It said that someday you see how humans will be able to access the internet without any hardware technology. It'll just, how do you see that? Is that like a chip being implanted, or like how would something like that happen?
So, of course, there are more advanced biological, solutions that we can talk about, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. But just practically, right? If you think of, you don't necessarily, you do need some piece of hardware, right?
Okay.
Until you figured out how, to just sort of create quantum conversations with your biology, which will probably happen at some point in the future. But until such time, right? Let's just think of, realistically how we do communication today, which is largely voice driven, or now we are trying to take brain waves and then construct them into meaningful, words and sentences and something that's relatable and understandable, or instructions. And Apple filed a patent in 2023 for AirPods with EEGs on them. That's probably not big news because it's probably under their apps, but it is public record. And the idea is that the EEGs, which today you have EEG brain devices, which you can kind of use for mind control of objects around you, right from toys that are like Star Wars like toys to advanced things like the playing Pong or whatever else. So now that possibility would be through simply an earpiece. So that gives you a larger, ability to do that. Now the question is how practical and real it would be, how much time it would take for that technology to evolve to a level that it's meaningful. We don't know yet.
I hope I'm alive long enough to see the time when we're doing quantum conversations. That sounds cool.
Yeah, it would
um,
be pretty amazing. It would be pretty amazing.
for sure, for sure. So, will an AI business leader emerge, and what would it mean? So, like, will our CEOs or at some point become AI?
I see. So you're saying is will AI sort of take the responsibility of the CEO? So it's
Correct.
interesting, right? Let's try and relate this back to something that we can all easily relate to. Let's think of the email, right? Which is still exists 25 years. We have all the social media, all technology. Email still exists. Stood the test of time as a technology that hasn't gotten old. It is
Right.
old, but it's not gotten old. It's young and fighting. So it's still there. Right? And so it's it goes to the gym every day. So 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 email, because it's so healthy after 25 years, let's learn from it, right? It's a very healthy piece of technology in that sense, and it knows how to stay alive. So this is probably going to go to the next level, right? The email is going to go to the next level. So if you think of, we kind of have that already, right? You have email marketing where someone can automate all the conversations. So I may get a lot of messages from JJ is not actually sending me those messages. Now, you could argue, is it AI as in it's sort of very dynamic in nature, or is it statically coded bunch of rules? So if you think of a lot of that rule-based intelligence that already exists around us in all our conversation and communication and decision making. For example, credit decision making when you're asking for a loan. For example, when you're making a wire transfer to know whether it's money laundering or not, some bank trying to block that. So a lot of that intelligence exists around us, and some of it is already powered by AI. And that's where the regulation is becoming really important now, because they're saying, oh, is it fair to make that decision? Because what's the consequence of that decision? You deny somebody a loan, would someone go and take their life as a consequence of that? So you don't know. So how
Mhm.
do you do it in the most empathic human way as possible? And so yes, the possibility of the technology to become the CEO probably already is there. It's just a question of we haven't linked up all the data. So the technology exists. The hard part is, have we taken all of the data in the enterprise, put it in one giant data store like how GPT has done it, and then run AI on top of it? And then what happens about governance and control? Because in a business you have need to know. Think of the secret of security clearances within the government. So how do you kind of layer all that? And so imagine if you had a way to layer all that permissioning and security around the data, and then people could ask meaningful questions of the digital CEO. It's doable. It's possible with today's technology. There's nothing to be invented there as such. But then the question is, would you leave that decision making? Would that just be a assistance tool? Like,
Sure.
the CEO is on leave. This is my autoresponder. Now, what can the autoresponder do? Can it just give you responses, or can it take a decision? And I think the cusp of that leadership comes in when you allow that digital machine, if you will, or digital AI leader to start taking decisions, because that's decisions have consequences. So I think that's
Sure.
the bridge we'll have to cross at some point.
So I would imagine AI is computing all probabilities, and the decision would be made on, or a part anyway, on likely outcomes based on probability, where the human CEO, right, perhaps is taking that into consideration as well too, but is also, being intuitive, which AI, I'm assuming, doesn't have that capability, and maybe, it will at some point, but certainly not now.
I think you're right. It's really about, will AI reach that situation where it has intuition?
Mhm.
And then it goes into a broader, more philosophical conversation around the foundation of Asimov and whether clones have souls. But
Yeah.
really, it's a question of whether foundationally there is intuition possible through, and goes back a little bit to the idea of metaphysics, to say everything is based on math. If you believe in metaphysics, you say, oh, okay, everything can be mathematically explained. And math is interesting because math has given us two things. One, it has given us algebra, and the other, it has given us probability. And so algebra is very deterministic in nature. You add stuff and that's how it goes, and you get the same answer every time. Probability is
Mhm.
chance. It tells you, okay, what are the odds, and the things may not be the same. And if you look at Heisenberg's, uncertainty principle, that's sort of where it goes. It says, you can't, even at the quantum level. So now, while at the quantum level, we know everything is non-deterministic in nature, it's probability based. At the macro level, we have been able to create a very predictable universe. right? You turn on the tap and the water comes out every time, except when you don't pay the bills. And so we built the deterministic model on a quantum world, which is highly probabilistic in nature. So I think that's where I see some of the questions to be answered.
Fascinating. So, because I think I'm reaching my limit in understanding, is there other things that we should know that maybe we haven't discussed at this point that would be great for my audience to know that, again, we haven't touched on?
I think one of the key questions that I've off late been fairly closely involved in is around digital governance. And
Mhm.
digital governance is, I think, is something which I definitely encourage everyone to look into as a human. It'd be like, oh, governance is probably the job of a government. Like, why should I care about it? Or maybe it's policymakers and regulators. But I think governance is every human's role, right? It's like how your mind has, I mean, your physical brain has a governing mechanism which defines all the motor skills. That's how you're able to walk, that's how you're able to talk. So if you did have no governance within your body, right, your entire body is governed through a set of systems. So I think governance inherently is required for a physical existence. And therefore, if we are becoming more digital in nature, it will be inherently required for our digital existence, for the digital version of us, of the human. And so therefore, for the physical piece, you kind of it just magically works. We know it just works. We can't always explain. The doctors and neuroscientists probably can explain a little bit of how things work, and even doctors will sometimes tell you, I really don't know why that's happening.
Sure.
So
Right.
so,
Yes.
so, so we haven't fully understood that. But I think as we create our digital versions, our digital memory, our digital analytical capabilities, and our digital decision making, imagine having a digital version of you, or digital twin, if you will, for the lack of a better term. There is a lot of questions to be answered around that. The ethics and the morality around a digital twin. It's kind of like a clone conversation. What
Sure.
happens if, who owns the rights to that? What is the mechanism for, so for example, if someone dies today, what happens to their Facebook account? Who
Mhm.
owns the rights to that? What if there were a lot of photos in that? I don't know how this is done today, but I'm sure there's a mechanism for that. And people would have gone, maybe, oh, I want to get my grandfather's or father-in-law's Facebook account. How do I do that? How do I get access to that? Like, is there, so I think we have to answer that question fundamentally. So fundamentally, what I believe is that a digital governance regime needs to be established globally, owned and operated as a global collective with all 8 billion participants, all humans, and everyone has a right or a voice on the table, and not controlled necessarily by a specific group of interest, a corporation or a government. So establishing something like that is paramount. And I use the word digital, not AI, because digital comprises of three pieces, which are critical to our digital human future. One is, of course, digital assets or virtual assets, which we are all familiar with, the blockchain, the crypto assets, the NFTs. Then the data, which is all, and I'll talk about data in a second, and AI. AI, we already know what it is. We're seeing enough of it, so don't have to explain it, but data is important. I break data down into three pieces, which are sort of pertinent for the sake of governance: entity, activity, and transaction. And I use the acronym EAT, so it's easy to remember. It's like, what's the data AI is going to eat? Entity, activity, and transaction. Entity is the data about things, whether it's a book or a person or a hotel room. Activity is the stuff that you do, whether you check in, check out, you read the book, you sell it, buy it, rent it. And then the transaction is the actual transaction that happens, where, whatever is the exchange, whether it's barter or for a price. So I think building a governance regime that takes into account these three aspects: the digital assets or virtual assets, if you will, data, which is entity, activity, and transaction, and artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is really about guardrails on what data AI can or cannot have, what decisions AI should or should not be making for you, and how do you sort of then manage, control, and govern all that around AI.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great explanation. I think, and at the core, I think a lot of people, maybe that was, their concerns and issues. And I love the way you framed it, right? It shouldn't be controlled or governed by a single entity, corporation, the 8 billion people who, have accumulated their own personal data, so on and so forth, have got to have a stake in the game, say in the process. Otherwise we lose our autonomy and we just become a part of a machine. And I think maybe perhaps that's where some of the fear and the uncertainty exist. And why, people who don't know it anywhere near as well as you do, you know, naturally we're uncomfortable with things that we don't know very much about. And I think that's where it exists.
Yeah, and I thank you for the kind comments. I definitely you're too kind to think that I know a lot. I don't know as much as you would make it out to be, but surely, I'm happy to share my knowledge and thinking and sort of lens on the world. If anything more than knowledge, I think I have a perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with I would agree with that, and you brought that here quite well today. And I really appreciated you taking the time and joining me today. It's really a fascinating conversation. Again, one that I've never explored on this platform before. And as this thing continues to evolve, I'd love to have you back on again. Where can people learn more about you and what you do? And because I know you had mentioned a website, so tell us about that.
Yeah, so if they want to find out more about our organization or company, they can go to intellibus.com. That's Intellli, two L's, Llibus.com. So that's intellibus.com. And again, for if they're leaders, executives who are interested to learn, they can definitely go to aimasterclass.com. So that's a joint
Mhm.
operation that Intellibus has with the New York University. It's all one word, aimasterclass.com. So that's for board members, CEOs of companies who are interested to learn more around AI and how should they think about AI within their organizations specifically. And then for people who want to take control of their privacy of their data, I would encourage them to go and look at bigparser.com. That's big parser.com. BigParser is essentially what I mentioned earlier to you around digital governance. It is the public repository of data. It's guardianship of that data, and it's a utility for people to use for managing their personal data and for engineers and developers to build apps that are ethically designed. So it's essentially, we call it an ethical AI platform.
That's fantastic. I'm really I'm excited to learn more. I just wrote it down. I'm definitely checking out the AI masterclass for sure because if you're an entrepreneur and you're in business, you have got to be, in my opinion, you've got to be at the forefront of how this is going to be impacting and changing business, the way we do business. And this is the technology that you don't want to be last to the table, in my opinion, because once your competitors know how to use it in a positive manner, I would imagine would give them quite an edge.
Indeed, and I think it's also going to give us a different lens on how to think about organizational corporate strategy. So one of
Mhm.
the things in corporate strategy that's I think the most popular corporate strategy is Michael Porter's five forces of competition. And essentially, it talks about how well can you negotiate. That's what it's based on. Negotiating salaries with your employees, or prices with your customers or vendors, and then how far can you keep your competitors at bay, or prevent substitutes from coming in the market. So it's sort
Mhm.
of based on what I would say the theory of basic theory of economics, but then more importantly in the idea of scarcity. Now, I think that's changed. The share economy has shown us, the world that, the connected world has shown us that it's really structural, that scarcity is a structural problem. Now, one could argue that, of course, physical natural resources are scarce, but then we have, leaders like Mr. Musk who will talk about going to Mars. So there is abundance in the universe. So it's just our,
Yes.
ability to then seek that abundance. So I think one of the things that we definitely talk about as we talk about the AI masterclass is how to bring that abundance mindset as a leader
Mm.
beyond just the idea of AI as a tool or a technology. How do you think of what we call the community first corporate strategy? And just focus on, at the very core, it's not about how well you can negotiate with others, but how well you can make connections. Imagine a world with 0 degrees of separation. And they say that some of the best networkers in the world are people who quickly connect other people without really thinking of
Sure.
what's the incentive they're getting in the short term. And then they end up building a very powerful community because the two people they connected remember that individual. And that's all you got, to build your brand. People remember you.
I would agree. I mean, and that comes from a level of authenticity where it's truly about, serving and helping other people, not based on your own needs, but truly out of service. And I've talked about that all the time. Like great leaders are great relationship builders. They can connect people or connect with people, and they built communities, which makes everyone better. and to leverage either others' skills and strengths that helps, the rising tide lifts all boats kind of concept. And so I love it. I can't wait to go check this out. I've got it, got it underlined twice, Ed. But I love the concept. You talked about abundance too, because this is, I just read an article from Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book Power of Persuasion. He wrote, scarcity as a concept towards sales and influence, but he talked about in an ethical manner in which, where it's the gain loss perspective. People do tend to buy more on loss than they do on gain. In fact, historically, this one study was 600% more. So it's pretty significant, but done in an ethical way to point out specifically if a prospective buyer does not understand what's at stake by not making the choice, and if only what's told is what there's to gain, the likelihood of them purchasing diminishes significantly. So, but again, he lays it out very clearly. It needs to be done in a very ethical manner.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that because there's also this, I believe it's a Harvard or MIT study where they talk about, human motivation. And they say that, humans are motivated by freedom, mastery, and purpose. And they essentially did a study where they tried to give more financial reward. And at some point, there was an inverse correlation between the higher the financial reward and the outcomes.
I saw that as well too, and that's pretty remarkable. One of my coaches, maybe about a decade ago, he said to me, "You'd be surprised how low on the motivation scale compensation is." He said, "Don't get me wrong, people want to make more money, but it's a very short-term motivation that quickly disperses or dissipates, and then it comes back to purpose and mission and that kind of thing. The stuff that we're all taught back in the day, as far as fundamentals when it comes to a business and an organization and a leader. People want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves.
Indeed, purpose above all else, and as one of my friends would say, principle above policy. So that's the other thing.
Yeah,
Remember, as we think about AI in our future, what are the principles and the guardrails that we want to put around our lives, around AI specifically, to make it more principled than policy driven.
define principle as in relationship to principal policy.
So if you think of, let's take an example, it'd be easier to wrap our heads around it. There could be a policy, within. So let's say that we have a policy for leave making, for leaves, right, within an organization, and that's easy for everyone to relate to. Oh, we have a medical policy that you can take 12 days leave. So now, if you had policy-driven decision making, the AI would be like, "Oh, your 12 days are over. You're done." Right? But
Mhm.
the principle is that we take care of people when they are in a hard situation, and someone has a really hard situation. So now you need to make an exception. So now the principle is to understand what that hard situation is, and should an exception be made. So a principled AI algorithm will be able to look very, in a very nuanced way at the specific situation. Obviously, you don't want someone gaming the system, but assuming that someone has a genuine situation, and this is what humans do, right? We look at what it is. We sort of look in a very principled way. We have our own lens, and then we make a decision. So something as simple as an automated approve my leave within a job could be principled versus policy driven.
Got it. Got it. Makes total sense. So, and again, this has been a lot of fun. Ed Watal's been my guest, the founder of Intellibus, and again, fascinating stuff. Really enjoyed our conversation. Triple P Nation, check out the AImasterclass.com and bigparsers.com, on the privacy that Ed had mentioned. His website is intellibus.com. Lots of awesome stuff. Again, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to share your knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you, Jay. It was a pleasure, and it's fun to talk about this topic of leadership and AI. It's very close to my heart.
I could tell. I could tell. I feel your energy.
Thank you.
so, so Triple P Nation, as we always say, you be you. Just show up your best, and you'll always empower your dreams, ignite your passion, and accelerate your prosperity. I know you're going to want to go back and listen to this because there was a lot of value bombs Ed dropped here. So until next week, everybody, be well.